Yeah, you haven't yet, have you? Started? Yes. Okay. Yeah. Just gonna sit here.
Kyle, we're ready to start whenever you are.
We're ready.
Okay, welcome everyone to this HMIS training for PATH providers here in South Carolina. This training is being sponsored by the HMIS Committee of the South Carolina Interagency Council on Homelessness. I'm Michelle Murph with the Department of Mental Health. I'm the state PATH contact here in South Carolina, and I'm here with Caitlin Flanagan, who's also with the Department of Mental Health and who also works with the PATH program. Next slide. So this is a webinar format type of training. Everyone is currently on mute. We will have a question and answer period at the end of the webinar. Questions can be submitted during the webinar using the chat function. And this webinar is being recorded. Next slide.
I just wanted to thank everybody who did a lot of hard work on organizing and getting this training together, particularly the HMIS committee. We have made a lot of strides since our first statewide training, and we're in a place where we're focusing now on data quality and outcomes as opposed to compliance measures. So I think it's a great step forward from where we were last time, and we hope that all of you get the information you need to keep doing amazing work in PATH program. So we're gonna get started, and our first presenters are Julie and Kyle from ECHO.
Good morning, everybody. This is Julie, and we're gonna move into the HMIS data requirements and definitions. Next slide. Starting with the two providers that will apply to all of your PATH clients in the entry-exit. The provider choices are supportive services only and street outreach. Supportive services only are for people that are sheltered or at-risk homeless clients. And the street outreach is for people literally in place not meant for human habitation. And the way that you determine the answer to which provider you should use is looking at the residents prior to project entry. So for place not meant for human habitation, that will always be street outreach. And for the others, it will be supportive services. It's important to remember that whatever a client gets entered into at project start is what they should stay for the remainder of the time. So if you enter them into street outreach and then they're moved into a transitional housing or an emergency shelter situation, they should stay street outreach for the remainder of the entry.
All right, great. Thank you, everybody. Good morning. My name is Kyle Jenkins. I'm with ECHO as well. And we're going to talk about the PATH admission process. So Julie started off by letting us know which project you'll be enrolling the client into when you first have that initial contact based off the residence prior to project entry. But PATH does have a 3-step admission process. It's a little bit different in regards to some of the other programs that are in HMIS because it's an outreach program. So there's more of a kind of a progressive engagement process for PATH, and it's a 3-step process. It starts with Project Start, which if you have been doing data entry in PATH for quite a while now, and you were on our last training, that used to be called the entry. In our HMIS system, there is language that talks about Project Start, and there's also language that talks about entry/exit. So I know it can be a little confusing. Some of the buttons still say entry, but they are the same process. It's your first initial contact with the client is your Project Start into HMIS. So that's done where we previously used to call them entry/exits. So it's done right there in that section of HMIS. Then you have engagement, and then you have an enrollment into the PATH program. They're kind of similar, but they all have a little bit of some different meanings. So we're going to first start with the word eligible, which is the most important part when determining if we're going to even start the process of entering them into HMIS under PATH. So what makes a person PATH eligible? I know most of you folks have been working and doing this for a while, so you probably know that, so I'm going to just kind of breeze through this. But there's 2 criteria that a person must meet. The first one is that they are experiencing homelessness or they are imminently at risk of becoming homeless. The other part that makes them eligible is the person has to have a serious mental illness with or without a co-occurring substance use disorder. When you are able to determine that, and it's really just kind of, it's not a clinical assessment really at this point. You may have that done, you may not. This is really just based off of the outreach workers' kind of their experience in, their professionalism in their job. They have a feeling that this person is going to be PATH eligible, so they know that they're literally homeless or at risk, and they also have a feeling that this person may be SMI, may have co-occurring disorder. So at that point, you can enter them in to the Project Start, which is previously the entry date. So the Project Start date is the date a PATH worker first has an interaction with an individual. That's the first contact. It can be as simple as just kind of getting their name and, maybe a little bit of background information. Your first contact does not have to be a full assessment. It can be, but it does not need to be. A final determination of PATH eligibility is not required at Project Start or entry. The PATH worker just needs to have that reasonable expectation that the individual will be PATH eligible, for example, homeless and serious mental illness. The second step in processing a PATH client throughout the HMIS system is your engagement date. So the engagement date is defined as a date when the individual begins an interactive client relationship. So that's the outreach worker having an interactive client relationship. And that could result in a deliberate client assessment or the creation of a case plan. Basically, it just means that it's the date that the individual agrees to work with the case manager. You've developed enough rapport at this point for them to trust you a little bit, and they've agreed that they want services from the PATH outreach team. The engagement date must occur on or after the project start date. So it can happen all on the same date. That's absolutely fine. And then there may be instances where the engagement date may be some days in the future after project start. So the first time you meet with them, you're going to enter them into Project Start, and then you may have an engagement date at that point in time. It may be sometime in the future. In Service Point, in our HMIS system, the date for a date of engagement is called date of engagement. So they make that one pretty simple in the PATH assessment. Note that once the engagement date is completed, all the universal data elements are required to be entered. So because this is an outreach program, they have allowed for data quality to be not as good when you first enter that project start date as you're developing that relationship. The idea would be is as you're engaging with them further to the point where you have an engagement date filled in HMIS, that should be the point that you have gotten all of the information that you need in HMIS to be able to fill out the full path assessment, which we will pull up in a little bit and kind of go through the assessment. But that is when data quality will start to be important for all path outreach programs. So make sure that before you enter the engagement date that you're able to answer, you know, I mean, they're really looking for high data quality at this point in the program. And then the last one is your enrollment date. So the enrollment occurs when an individual's path eligibility has been determined and that individual agrees to participate in path services. And they call that an open case. So you may have somebody that has an open case at your mental health provider or at the Department of Mental Health. And, you know, they're currently now receiving services from that mental health provider. So this date must occur on or after the engagement date. And in Service Point, it's entered into the date of path status determination field. And then there's a secondary question to that where you have to also designate if the client became enrolled in PATH, and that would be changed to a yes for a client that was determined to be PATH eligible and was enrolled into the PATH program. So at this point, you're actually serving a PATH client, and you are able to also provide them with PATH-funded services and all of that as well. So what if your client wasn't PATH eligible? What do you do? So in HMIS, because of the progressive engagement approach that they've given us and they want us to use, you may have folks that are not PATH eligible once you've been working with them. You may be working with them for a while at this point. But if they aren't determined eligible, they go to the mental health, maybe they didn't get diagnosed with serious mental illness, or maybe they decided they didn't want any types of services, that's okay. What you would need to do is you still want to enter in the date of PATH status determination, and then you would also then want to answer that secondary question, client became enrolled in PATH, to a no. So that's how they determine if they were actually enrolled or not, is that secondary question as either yes or no. You want to, then there's a third question. If the client became enrolled in PATH field is set to no, you have to answer why the individual or the reason the individual was not enrolled in PATH. And then you can exit the individual from the PATH project in the entry exit screen at that point. If they were not enrolled, that's really all we're going to be able to do. You're probably going to send some type of referral somewhere else if they're still interested in some kind of service. But as far as PATH goes in HMIS, we exit them from the system at that point. And just an FYI, that since the new data standards have come out for PATH, they have kind of set this threshold outreach that they're looking for. And in the PATH program, they're looking at 58% of clients that are outreach to becoming enrolled in PATH. So 58% of those who are determined to be eligible will ultimately become enrolled by agreeing to participate in services. Now, we may have a higher standard than that in the state. I don't know, but I just wanted to show you guys that they have set that standard more at the federal level. This slide just kind of walks you through the process that we went through verbally. I really like it. It's a little grainy, I apologize, but we had to take it from the manual. And so as you can see on the left-hand side, you have your project start, and that's your first contact with the client. Then as you're working with the client, you kind of go through the engagement process there in the blue, and you're collecting UDEs, which are the universal data elements, and the PSDEs, which are project-specific data elements. The big takeaway here is that in the assessment, when you're entering in the information, you really want to shoot for answering all the questions in the assessment. There are going to be situations where clients may not answer certain questions or the information is just not collected, but the goal should be to answer 100% of the questions in the assessment as you're building that relationship with the client. At this point, this is when you enter the date of engagement, and then you're going into enrollment. So enrollment is going to be when you actually have that diagnosis, they've agreed for services, and they've been found to be PATH eligible. At this point, all your PATH-funded services and referrals will kick in, where you will definitely want to start tracking those. And we have a couple of slides later on about services and referrals specifically. And then at the end of, if they're enrolled or they're not enrolled, you ultimately are going to exit them from the project, and you're going to have to select a project exit date, and also going to have to select a reason for leaving and their destination upon leaving. All of this happens, and you have to make sure that the client is experiencing homelessness and has serious mental illness and or co-occurring. If you don't have that reasonable expectation up front, we're really not going to be tracking that person throughout HMIS under the PATH program. All right, so as you know, you will encounter difficult to engage homeless persons. You guys do this every day. Street outreach workers may record a project start with limited information about the clients and improve on the accuracy and completeness of client data over time by editing and updating data in HMIS as they continue to engage the client. And I've kind of been touching on this throughout. You know, the idea is that as you're developing that relationship, you're continuing to collect and gather the information that's necessary for the data collection. So contacts. Contacts are any time that there is a direct interaction between an outreach worker for PATH and the client that's designed to engage the client. They include meeting in person or speaking by phone, so you don't have to have a physical interaction. It can be through the phone. And PATH outreach workers are expected to record every contact made with each client in HMIS. So it's important to note that the first contact recorded is also your project start date. So as we go through this process, you'll see where anytime you're entering in a project start date, the first contact date that you're going to be entering in for that particular project entry, project start, will be the same for your first contact. Then as you're working with them, you're going to keep going back into the assessment, and you're going to be adding new contacts every single time you engage with that person by phone or in person. So using the outreach sub-assessment, so all of you guys, once you record that project start and you click save, and we will get into the system, you'll be taken to the assessment screen in HMIS. All of you will have a little box that says outreach. The outreach sub-assessment is where you record all of your contacts. So the first contact you add in HMIS will be the date you and the client first met. Like I was saying, that's going to be the same as your entry or project start date. And then when adding a new contact, the date of contact, start date, and end date all just need to be the same. So as you can see here under Test Jill, the bottom picture that we have there on the right, you have 3 dates that you need to put in there, and they all just will be the same. So match your start and end date with the date of contact. And this is because PATH tracks contacts by each individual contact. So we don't track the contacts from start to end date. So if you had a contact over multiple days, it would still only be counted once. So that's why we want them all to be the same date. And you have to also select a location for the contact. And there's only, I think there's 3 options that you can use there for your location. So Brandy Yant, who's the HMIS project manager at Low Country Homeless Coalition, unfortunately, she's been a little sick and her voice is still recovering. So I'm going to go ahead and be covering the PATH assessment and the sub-assessments as well. So you heard me talking about the UDEs and the project-specific data elements, and this is just a quick list of the universal data elements. Universal data elements in HMIS basically means that these are the elements that are required of all projects to enter in. So if you're an HMIS participant, your organization is entering HMIS, all of the universal data elements need to be attempted to be collected throughout the process. The program required data elements are going to be the data elements that the specific program that your funding may come from, the specific program that you work for. That's the data elements that they require. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and jump into the system. So I'm already logged into our Service Point training site, and I'm actually following one of the users here in our continuum of care for PATH. And I'm going to kind of breeze through and create a new client. First thing that you're going to want to do is go to the Client Point module or menu item on the left-hand side. I like to just note that Client Point is green at the top. That's how you always know you're in the correct area for HMIS when you're entering into Client Point, because it is green at the top. And so we're just going to search for a test client in the system. And there's a bunch of them because this is the test site. But we're also going to add a new client with this information. So we're going to add a new client today. Your search screen may look different depending on the settings that your HMIS admin has set up for your user and your organization. So I just wanted to note that. For the name, we do encourage getting first, middle, and last name. It is not required to get the middle name as far as being able to report full name reported under name data quality, but we do highly encourage that you have the middle name and a minimum, the middle initial. That really helps just with the information and being able to determine that the individual is maybe separate from somebody that would have the same name. The more the information, the better. The alias, we kind of consider that as a freebie field in our COC. There may be different things that providers will enter into the alias field. I know a lot of our folks here are entering in a mobile phone number or their most recent contact number for the client. That way it's easy to grab in the search field. We're going to enter in a social. The system does allow you to just collect the last four, but we also encourage, and PATH also encourages, collecting the full Social Security number. And that's important when you get to the data quality for Social Security number, because you can do an approximate or partial. So if you did have just the last four, you would be using the partial Social Security number reported. In instances where you have the full, it would be the full. And then military veteran status. We're going to say no for this particular example. And then we're going to add new client with this information. Now, like I said, you may have some additional fields over here that you can enter in date of birth and ethnicity and race. For this particular user on the test site, we don't have that enabled, so we will do that in the next step. Anytime you go to a client and client profile and Client Point, you're going to see backdate mode. We're going to hit use current system date at this point. So we're going to be launched to the summary screen. Some of these may look just a little different depending on how your HMIS admin has set you up. But ultimately, you should have the majority of these tabs here at the top. And you may land on a different tab depending on how your HMIS admin has you set up on the user side. But we're going to go to Client Profile, and we're going to enter in the client demographics for this client. And I am going to backdate this information so that way we can have a good example where we can show you some interims as well. Let's do 4-1. So it's important to note that when you're in backdate mode changes the whole system to a different point in time that's somewhere in the past. So you can change your backdate date and time at any time by clicking the link here, and it brings you back to where we just were. You can also exit backdate mode at any time by clicking the red X next to the time, and it will take you out of backdate mode and put you back into current date and time. I like to just tell everybody that always double check your backdate up here in the top right hand corner. You can accidentally backdate to your current date, but just in a previous time. So you would still show, like for today's example, it would still show 4/8/2019, but maybe you did it for, 7 a.m. So just always double check that to make sure, because the dates are really important for the path process. So we're going to click on the pencil. That allows us to edit. Anytime you see a pencil, you should be able to edit that information. And we're going to enter in a date of birth. The date of birth type is just like the name data quality and the social security number data quality. You're just going to be entering if it's a full or if it's an approximate. You're going to select a gender. And then we're going to select a primary race. And I know these options are not exhaustive. If you're having trouble trying to determine a race or even a gender, it's always best to, if you can have the options kind of there in front of them, or you can kind of help navigate them to the options that you know that you're going to have in HMIS that can help allowing them to choose them. Okay. Secondary race is not required. So if somebody does identify as having a secondary race, you can record that, but it is not required. So if somebody does not identify having a secondary race, you can just leave it at select. And then ethnicity is either non-Hispanic, non-Latino, or Hispanic Latino. And then we're going to go ahead and save that information. And then I'm going to exit backdate mode now at this point, now that I've entered in the demographics. All right, so I'm going to jump in now to the entry exit screen. And this is where I was saying it's a little confusing in our system currently because HUD and PATH have actually changed the wording from entry to project start, but we still have remnants of that entry element in some of the options that we have to click here. But as you can see, it does show, I'm highlighting here, that it is the project start date. So just be aware that as you're navigating the system, that for us, entry and project start date are synonymous, so the same term. So we're going to add the entry exit. This is where Julie was speaking of having two different options for PATH. So this particular user does enter in the coordinated entry system and does have the ability to do that, so we'll ignore that today. But we do have the PATH Street Outreach and the PATH Supportive Services only. So for this client, we're going to use an example of someone that's literally homeless, street homeless. So we're going to pick the Street Outreach program. And then for your type, you should be picking PATH. And as you can see, I can actually set the project start date to a previous date here. So there is a difference between backdate mode and then backdating a specific piece of information. Admins across the state may have certain preferences or certain ways that they may teach you, depending on the workflow that they feel is best for their continuum. But there is the ability to backdate just certain pieces of information throughout the system. So that's what I'm doing here. All right, so we now have our tile test is now entered into our project start or the entry. And it's important to note that your assessment here on the right-hand side may look a little different depending on the continuum of care that you're in. Some of these pieces of information may be organized a little differently, or maybe the questions may have different colors. That's just preference. So if you're noticing that yours is a little different, go back to the UDEs and the project-specific data elements slide that we're going to send out, and you can double-check, just make sure you have everything there, but our admin should have everything taken care of for you that on the assessment. So the first thing that we need to do is enter in a contact here under Outreach. And as we discussed on the slide, this first contact first time we've ever met with the client needs to be the same date as our project start date up here right above it, if you can notice that. So we're going to do date of contact, start date, and end date all on the same date. Looks like they've actually updated the contact. They used to ask kind of the location there. Now they're more concerned about if they're staying on the street, emergency shelter, or safe haven. So that previous slide we will need to update before we send it out to you guys. But yes, they are staying on the street, emergency shelter, or safe haven, or no, they are not, or worker was unable to determine. So you'll need to put that in for every contact that you make with the client throughout the time that you work with the client. Now we can save this here and move on and add some different data elements, or we can save and add another contact if needed. So that's really helpful when you have maybe multiple contacts across a few days or a week, and that you want to make sure that you are getting them all in. Maybe do your data entry, you know, every other day. I know that we prefer data entry to be entered as real time as possible, and each COC may have separate standards on that, but the idea is to try to get the information in as quickly as possible, so that way we don't lose data quality in the process of waiting to get it in. All right. Now I need to get that slide. All right, so that's how you enter in a contact. Now we're going to quickly go through the sub-assessment for income, non-cash, health insurance, and disability. So on each one of those questions, you will see a HUD verification symbol that's here, and it will have a hazard symbol next to it if it has not been completed. So you want to make sure all the responses to the sub-assessment have been entered in as either a yes or a no. And the income and disability sub-assessments will ask you for additional information if there is a yes response selected for that income or that disability. So in the disability sub-assessment, you will see when we go back into the system that there's the additional questions that it's going to ask you when you select yes for the disability determination. So for this particular one, it's a mental health problem. And you must answer if the question is expected to be of long, continued, and indefinite duration and substantially impairs their ability to live independently. So that's the actual definition of a disability from HUD and for PATH. So you want to make sure that you answer that question. And then number 2, as you can see, it says retired there in parentheses. So this is just some leftover remnants of data that Service Point is still working to remove. So when it says retired, you can skip that particular question in the system. All right. So I'm going to skip these for at the moment. So here's our income sub-assessment. There are actually 3 pieces of data that are all related to income. So they're all relative to each other. If you have income with the client, if they have income, you want to select yes for are you currently receiving income from any source. Then you're going to click on your HUD verification. And when you click on that HUD verification, these are all the sources of income here on the left-hand side that HMIS recognizes. The easiest way that we train here in our continuum, and I think we do this across the state, is to use these options up here at the top to move all of your dots. It's easiest to move them to no first and then move over the dot to whichever type of income that client may have. So we're going to do earned income. And here's the additional information that HMIS was looking for income if you select yes. So monthly amount. So this is only in reference to that earned income. So if we have a client that has multiple sources of income, you're going to want to separate those out and then add each one of them separately into the system. And it's based on a monthly amount here. So we're going to say $200. The start date, because we're just looking at a slice of time here, The start date doesn't have to be an exact start date for that client's income. If you happen to know a date in the past, you can enter it, but the most important part is that the start date matches the project start of the client into the PATH program. So that way PATH will recognize it in your PATH report that they had income. So it doesn't have to be an exact. It can just, as long as you're making sure that it's the same date as the project start, you'll be okay and it will be included. So let's just go ahead and say that this client did have some SSI as well, and we're going to do that one for 100, just to show you how that works with multiple income sources. So at this point, we're done entering into the HUD verification. We're going to hit save and exit. The HUD verification turns from a hazard to a green check mark when all the sources of income have been answered. So that check mark is not an indicator on if you have actually done it correctly and entered everything in, or if you have, it's just not an indicator of correctness. It's an indicator that you have filled in all of the sources of income as either a yes or a no. So we want our total income to match all of our sources of income that we entered. So we did an earned income and we did an SSI, one for 200 and the other for 100. So our total monthly income will be $300. So all three of those kind of work together and need to make sense. Non-cash benefits are for any benefits that are not cash related. So a good example of that is you do have TANF, which I think they also call FI now, Family Independence, but they have a cash benefit of FI and TANF, so there is that up here under the income. But then when we click on the HUD verification, you will also see some other types of TANF services that are additional services that are not cash-based, that may be given based on voucher or something like that. So they do separate out those services. So this is only for your benefits that you don't receive an actual check for, essentially. So I'm going to select yes for food stamps. Actually, first I'm going to say no for receiving the benefit for all of them, and then we're going to select yes. And as you can see, it does not populate a secondary option or a secondary screen to answer any additional questions. HUD and PATH do not require you to have any other additional information for non-cash benefits. When I save it, though, you will see that there are edit pencils that become available. And if I click on that, it does allow me to enter in the amount of the non-cash benefit if that's something that my organization or your HMIS administrator is requiring of you guys. Health insurance works exactly the same way. HUD verification, select no, and then move over any of the options over to a yes if there are any. So we're going to say Medicare. And then disabling condition. So because of the eligibility determination in PATH, you're going to want to make sure all of your head of households have a disabling condition of mental illness, serious mental illness. So when you click on the HUD verification, again, no for all of them, and then we're going to move it over. And in HMIS, they actually designate serious mental illness as mental health problem. So when we select yes, this is the screen that we saw on the slide. So we are going to document if it's expected to be of long, continued, and indefinite duration, and then substantially impairs their ability to live independently. And then we're going to skip this question below because it is retired. We don't need to put any end dates at this point for any of the sub-assessments. We want to put end dates when we know information is ending and we're changing it. We don't want to project out an end date just in case things may change in the future. And that's for any of your sub-assessments. All right, and then the last slide for me today is interim reviews and updates. And I'll actually run through some of the other data elements too on that assessment. I don't want to forget that. An interim review and an update is when any information is changing throughout the course of your engagement with the PATH client. So basically, it's in between project start and in between the exit. So anytime you're adding information into the system between those two dates, you're going to be wanting to use the interim review, and we're going to use the option as update. So for you guys, it's really important to understand this because this is how you add your contact. I'm really sounding like I'm echoing. All right. So when you get into HMIS, you'll see in the entry exit tab where we added our project start that there is also an interim option here. When we click on the little picture for the interim, it's going to allow us to add an review, and then we're going to select the interim review type from the drop-down list.
I'm sorry. Can you go back a little bit because there's a lot of distraction in the back end? Can everyone please mute their systems so that there's no feedback hitting back? There's like a good 5 minutes of what you just said, Kyle, that was not clear.
Okay, is that better?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So interim reviews are going to be a necessary step in the process for a PATH client as you're updating and adding information as you're engaging that client. And it's also important to note that anytime you're adding a new contact into the system for a client, you're going to want to use the interim review process to be able to add that additional contact. An interim is any point in time between the project start and the project exit of a client. To add the interim review, go to the entry exit tab and select the little icon under interims that's pointed out here on the slide. You're going to add an interim review and select the update as the interim review type from the drop-down list. You also will need to select a date for that interim review, and that date will need to be after your project start, definitely. It should be the same date as the contact that you made with the client. So that looks like this in the system. We have the interim here. We're going to select that interim and hit Add Interim Review. The interim review type is Update, and we're going to select a date of review. So the review date is April 5th, 2019. So when we go into our assessment, the first thing I'm going to do is add a contact for 4/5/2019. That's the date I actually spoke or met with the client. My end date will also be the same as we've done before. And then we're going to select either yes, no, or unable to determine if the client is still staying on the street in an emergency shelter or a safe haven. So as you can see, like we were talking about before, the next couple of questions are date of engagement, PATH status determination, any of those things. As you're working with the client, you are able to add these additional pieces of information. One thing to note, though, is if you did not answer any of the homeless questions in the beginning when you first did the project start date, you will need to go back to the entry to make sure that you get those pieces of data completed. So that's going to be your residence prior to project entry. That's going to be the date of homelessness and any of the chronic questions that go along with that. So if you didn't get that filled in when you first did your project start, you will need to go back to the entry pencil to open that assessment back up and re-enter it. Any other pieces of information you should be able to update through the interim review process. That includes our date of engagement and our date of pass status determination. So I'm going to go ahead and enter our date of engagement as of the date of this last contact that we just entered, which was April 5th, 2019. We're also going to pretend that we have determined them eligible. So we're going to select yes for our client became enrolled in PATH. If the answer was no for client became enrolled in PATH, you do want to make sure that you select the reason they were not enrolled. And they have two simple reasons. Client was found ineligible for PATH or client was not enrolled for other reasons. Connection with SOAR. So SOAR is a big program, I know, across our state and across the country. It helps with disability claims for folks that are homeless. And so we are tracking, and PATH is tracking if you're connecting clients with SOAR. So if you're able to give them a referral to the SOAR team, or if you are trained in SOAR yourself and you're starting that process, you will want to make sure to document that as yes. Otherwise, it will be no. Somehow it didn't save my income information. So when you're updating income, non-cash benefits, health insurance, or disabilities at any point during someone's enrollment in your program, you want to make sure that you update the sub-assessment to reflect the accurate information as it's changing. So in this particular example, let's just pretend that our client their income has changed. So we're going to go into our HUD verification, and we're going to update their income as of this point. So earned income, we click on the pencil, and then we need to put an end date for this particular record. You do not want to change this to no or change any of the dates, because that will actually overwrite the historical information of that piece of data. So you just want to put an end date to make sure that you maintain the historical record that that client did have $200 in earned income. It's important also to note that dates are really important at this point. We want to make sure that the end date for this particular record is sometime before the review date, which was April 5th up here at the top. If not, it will not allow us to enter in the new income information that we need. So I'm going to put 4/4/2019, one day before our review date, and I'm going to save that. If you did it correctly, you should notice that the piece of information that you had just ended will be marked as incomplete. And then this allows you to remark that as either no or yes if it's gone up or down. So we're going to say that our client has now gained an extra $100, so $300 now versus $200. Start date will be the review date, 4/5, and we're going to leave it open-ended with no end date. When you do that, you also want to make sure that you are changing currently receiving income from any source and total monthly income, because these three pieces of data all work in conjunction together. So if the client completely lost income, we would be switching this answer to no, as well as ending all the incomes in the verification, and also changing the total monthly income to 0 or blank. For our example here, we're going to leave this yes, but we are going to update our monthly income to $400. This process works pretty much the same for each other sub-assessment. The only difference may be that with the non-cash benefits and with health insurance, it will not be asking you the additional pieces of information as for like how much and things like that. So it's more about just making sure that your start and end dates for each piece of information in these sub-assessments flow in the timeline of in the system. So I always like to, if there's a ton of changes that happen throughout the course of a client's enrollment, I like to just draw a straight line on a piece of paper, put project start on one end, whatever date we are on at the end, and then I just try to mark out all the different pieces of information as they change to make sure that I'm getting everything accurate. All right, so we're going to click Save and Exit, and that's how you do an interim review in the system. All right, and it looks like I covered everything there on that slide. All right, Cecilia.
All right, we'll make Cecilia presenter. All right.
If you just shut up your volume. I'm sorry, guys. Can you all hear me?
We can hear you.
I don't know where my slides went. Slides.
I don't think I'm the presenter anymore, so I don't know if how I can switch it over to you, Cecilia.
I already switched it over to Cecilia.
Oh, okay, great.
I don't have access to the slides anymore. Do you know where they went?
Ellen, if you leave me as presenter, I have the slides already up, if that works.
All right.
And then when we're done with the slides, if you can just shoot it back towards me, then we can just go back in HMIS. That would work.
Okay, Kyle, you're back to being presenter.
All right, good morning, everyone. Again, I am Cecilia Rodriguez. I'm the HMIS program coordinator here at the Upstate Continuum of Care. And my component for today's PATH training is going to be on service transaction and referral. And just to go over the next slide, just want to point out a couple of things. Not sure how many of you have read the the PATH guidance, but the data element P1 services provided specifically states related to PATH-funded services that is used to determine the PATH-funded services that are provided to a client during project enrollment, also following project enrollment and prior to project exit. So keep in mind that the PATH annual report only requires that you collect one response for each service provided. However, PATH providers may choose to collect multiple instances of each service. I will be showing you how to do that in HMIS once we go over these slides. Next slide. So the PATH funded are services, like I just said, being provided to a client and recorded in HMIS during that program enrollment. I just said that. Next slide. And pretty much what we want to make sure is that when you are recording services, that the date of PATH status determination and when client became enrolled in PATH are entered so that the actual PATH services and PATH referrals can then be counted. So if the date of PATH status determination and client became enrolled in PATH is not selected or entered, then when you are actually doing services under the PATH funded services, it will not record. Let's go to the next slide. And that's where, this is the area where you will identify the type of PATH funded services that is being provided, again, once the client is enrolled. Next slide. All right, those are my slides. So what I'm going to do is show you in HMIS everything I just told you in those slides. So I am going to go ahead and now take over. I'm hoping that you guys can see my screen. Perfect. I'm going to shadow my friend Mary Kay here. And I'm just going to go ahead and go over exactly how you go ahead and you do that. So,
Cecilia,
yes, ma'am.
did this in
I'm sorry, I didn't hear anything you said.
just make sure we're not going into any clients.
I already have it all set up. I got it. Thanks. All right. So what I'm going to show you is once you get into your client record, Kyle went from beginning to end pretty much of how to enter your client and how to fill out every single field in that actual path assessment. Once that's completed, what you do is you move on to service transactions. Okay, now what I do want to point out is that I did say that your path funded services are tracked once your client's engaged and once your client's been identified as being eligible for path. However, you can track services that you've provided at Street Outreach prior to the client becoming engaged. What I'm going to show you is how to add services once the client's engaged and determined path eligible. So what you're going to do is you're going to click on Add Multiple Services. In the Add Multiple Services, you have to make sure that your service provider is selected under the project that you're actually doing data entry for that client. So we're going to pick Street Outreach here. Your start date and end date will be the same, and your timestamp will automatically default to the same as your start date. So we're going to use today's date. Here's my Street Outreach provider, and my service type is going to be case management. Your type of path funded service, and this is, like I said, us knowing that we're doing this service based on the fact that the client's already path eligible. So here's the service that I am going to go ahead and select is case management. Now I also want to point out that you all should have what's called the Path Services and Referrals Crosswalk. If you don't have it, I recommend that you have it printed and have it by your computer or anywhere that is readily available for you, because the Path Service and Referrals Crosswalk will actually show you what path service you provided and what service descriptions in HMIS. Okay? Then here what you do is you scroll down to the bottom, and your need status is always going to be closed, and you're going to identify the outcome of need as it being either fully met or not met. Okay? On the day of services, you might have more than just one service. So the reason for multiple service is that you can actually do one if you want to. It will record the need behind the scenes for you. And it's less steps if you were to use the add a single service tab. If you only have one service, you can go ahead and save and exit. But if you have other services, then you click on add service, and then you go to the next service. And let's say in this case, it was mental health screening that you provided. And then you would just go ahead and based on your path crosswalk, it will tell you that if you provided a service of mental health screening, that the type of path funded service provided would be screening. And again, you're going to identify the need status as closed. Outcome of need was that it was met, and we're going to save and exit. And now here you will see the two services that you provided under outreach. If we go back to the dashboard and view the entire history, you'll be able to see the service and the need provided under the provider Street Outreach path for mental health screening and for case management. Any questions in that area? You can type in your question. If not, then we'll move on to the referral section. Okay. Same thing for referral section. Once you're done with your entry exit, you're just going to go ahead and click on your service transaction. But before I go ahead and I do that, I just want to make sure that you understand the difference between attained, not attained, and unknown. So the referrals provided in PATH, they're used to determine the referrals that are provided to a client during the project enrollment. So a referral has been attained once the PATH enrolled client begins receiving services as the result of PATH assistance. PATH providers are not required but encouraged to record each instance of PATH-funded referrals provided to PATH enrolled clients. Not attained means that the client was referred to but may not have ever been connected with the service or did not actually receive the service. And then unknown means that the status of the client's connection or receipt of service is unknown to the provider entering the data. So how that looks is you will click on service transaction and you would click on add referral. Okay. Now, you can have your system admin at your local COC provide you with the service quick list, and the service code quick list come from the PATH service and referral crosswalk. So it's easy for you to just select from the drop down here, and you can actually select up to 5 service referrals if it's going to that one particular provider. So for example, up here we have we have the Greenville Mental Health, and they provide several services within Greenville Mental Health. So our folks here are able to select more than just one service instead of doing one at a time. All right, so I am going to go ahead and I'm just going to go ahead and select job finding assistance, which is on your HMIS service description for PATH referral under employment assistance. So I go ahead and select the job finding assistance. You go ahead and click on add terms. Okay, if you scroll down to the bottom, I just want to show you, this is where the actual need of that referral will fall in right here, okay? So we're going to go back up. The next thing you need to do is that you need to select the provider. Now, your local system admin can also have what's called a provider quick list for you, so that you don't have to search for those providers. So these are all the active providers that our PATH outreach workers actually make referrals to. So what we're going to do is we have to also make sure that that job finding assistance service is listed under your actual quick list provider, because it might be that you select a provider that might not have that service, so it might, it might not work. So in this case, we're just going to go ahead and we're going to select a provider. Let's see, thinking out loud here. And if you scroll down, you will see the provider and you will see the service here. Okay, so far so good. Then the next step that you're going to scroll to is the actual referral data. Okay, the referral ranking, is it high, medium, or low? You decide how you want to rank that. The only time that our PATH outreach worker adds the VI-SPDAT score to the actual referral is if they're referring their client to actually a housing provider, emergency shelter, rapid rehousing project, permanent supporting, transitional housing, anything related to housing, that's when they're adding the VI-SPDAT score. If not, then this is left blank. Type of path referral, this is where it will match, like I mentioned earlier with services, your job finding. If you look at your path service and referral crosswalk, it would be under employment assistance when it comes to the path referral type. Now, the type of path referral made, select outcome, would not be at this point determined because you're making the initial path referral. So the recommendation is that you actually project a follow-up date, so then you can go back and you can actually determine if this particular referral was attained, not attained, or unknown. So the projected follow-up date, there's really no ruling on that. It's based on how you want to track this referral and how soon. So it all depends on when this appointment was made. So I'm going to go, just for training purposes, I'm going to go ahead and check in on this referral on Friday the 29th. So I'm just going to go ahead and type in that date. As you can see, the follow-up user, this has nothing to do with the actual project. It's just saying that the follow-up user it's a Greenville Mental Health end user, and the person making the referral is Mary Kay Campbell. Currently, we do not have what's called service point providers by email, so do not check this. Don't assume that that if you check this off, that it's going to automatically send a referral to the VA. So once, this is a way of you tracking that referral and tracking that count of the referral, but you have to make that contact yourself by calling or emailing directly the referral source. So now the next part is going to be of you checking the actual service need. So here's your referred to provider, here's the need, and there's the client information. There's the date of need. And then here, what we're going to do, this one's a little different than when you do the service. So here you are going to actually identify the need status as in progress. And then you're going to go ahead and you're going to save it. And there is your actual referral with the need and the type of status. And if you go back to the dashboard and you view your entire service, you're going to see that there was a referral made, and there's a need, and there is your services as well. Now, let's say that it is the 29th, and you want to go ahead and follow up on that referral that you made. So what you do is, through your dashboard, that referral follow-up should present here. So what you would do is, on the due date, you would click on that referral type. It would bring you straight to that referral. It would bring you to that section where it says referral data. And here you are going to, you need to make sure that you select the outcome of that referral. And now here's where you would identify if it was attained, if it was not attained, or if it was unknown. And then we're just going to go attained, and then the referral outcome was accepted, and the complete follow-up date was going to be the date that you actually did that check-in. At this point, it's very important that you don't bypass the need status and outcome, and that you change from in progress to closed and fully met. So pretty much the workflow is that if the referral type outcome was not attained or unknown, your need status is going to be closed and not met, and then it's going to have a reason why that is the case. And then what you're going to do is you're going to save and exit, And then all of that information will be updated, and that is how you do a referral from start to end. And that was my portion of the training. I hope that this was clear. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to type them in, and I'll be more than happy to walk you through it again at the end of this presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Julia. All right, guys, give me 1 second. Let me pull up everything. All right. So Melissa and I are going to kind of tag team on when we're working in our Google Docs, and when we're also in Service Point as well. Keyboard. So that can help you to close it out on us. That's okay. Google Drive. It's a Monday for the computer, so just give us a second. All right, slide 33. It's getting there. Okie dokie. All right, so like I said, Melissa and I are going to tag team on the next 2 sections. Because she can account for the data analyst side when we talk about discharging clients, and I'm going to speak about the system admin side, and then also with some of the report, because I know a lot of times in all the continuums we kind of tag team when it comes to our system admins and our data analysts. So we all know that exiting clients has been kind of a bear for a lot of people, and it's the nature of the beast with our profession. We have clients who hopefully are housed. It's great. It's wonderful. But sometimes we do know that sometimes clients disappear on us. They move, and of course, they don't check in with us. So, we have to exit them at certain times. So we hope the latter happens, and that go back. You clicking on the thing, the mouse is being a little. Our mouse is very sensitive around here, and sometimes it likes to work and sometimes it doesn't. So hopefully the clients, because I know that in Mock we have a really great relationship with our PATH providers, coming to case conferencing and trying to connect our folks who are in PATH programs to housing services. So of course, when a client exits to permanent housing, we do want to go ahead and exit them from the program. Because we want to show that they are no longer on the streets. If we have them open in street outreach and they're housed, and then we're also making notes in their street outreach entry exit, what it's looking like to the whole system is that the client is returning back to homelessness. So we have to make sure that we are exiting them before, on the day they're actually going into their housing program, so that way the system doesn't feel like it's lapsing over and over again. Okay? So the second option is when the client is housed in a more stable condition and the clinical staff feels like they're ready for discharge. So that's the professional opinion of the clinical staff. And then the last one, if a client is unable to be found and has not had contact in approximately 90 days. We would like it to be within that 90-day period. We do know that there's some circumstances that are kind of anomalies. We get that. But for the majority of your clients, we would like for your clients to be exited if you have not had any contact with them in 90 days. Because, like we said, sometimes they'll move on us, and we have no idea where they went to, and we just don't want it to just look like we're just not serving these clients. Because, I know Terrence is always out and about on his bike trying to find these people, and we want to show that, hey, this person has moved on. We don't want it to look like Terrence and our other outreach workers are not doing anything. We want to show, because I know that they're always you know, I always call Miss Diane, but she's always busy. Whereas Miss Aaron, I can never get him on the phone because he's always out in the field. So, and I know the same thing goes across the state, that y'all are always hard at work. So we just want to present in the system all the great things that y'all are doing. Okay. All right, so when you go to exit a client, like we talked about, our 3 different reasons to exit a client. I am going to show you in HMIS how to do that, so do not fret. I will meet you there in just a second. So we do want to put the exit date, of course. This is going to be the date that they're no longer in the program. So what we want to make sure what we're doing, especially for those who are housed, is that we want to put it right, and this is where Kyle kind of talked about, you know, the dates and times are very sensitive to one another. So what we want to make sure is that if we see that a client is going into permanent supportive housing, that we want to put their date and time just before they went into permanent supportive housing. So once again, we do not have that lapse that they're returning back to homelessness. So for example, I just get really antsy when it comes to the time, because we know that time is, even if you're a second off, it can make, you know, it can just mess everything up. So what I would recommend doing is that if you see a client, like let's say that, you know, because Mercy has permanent support housing as well, if they see that Demesia put the client in at 1 p.m., they might want to go ahead and put them, you know, exit them at 11 a.m. Okay? Just to make sure, you know, you just want to be very careful because the system is so sensitive to those dates and times. And it doesn't have to be your provider. You can actually see another provider and see when they enter the client into the program. So just use HMIS to your advantage, so that way you don't have to go back and fix stuff at a later time. Reason for leaving and destination. On your data quality reports that we're going to talk about in just a little bit, this does play into if you get a null value or not. Okay? So I'm going to go over, and sign me out. Oh, I want to pipe it over here. It's a Monday. I haven't had that happy this morning. Okay, so I'm going to come into my training site. So like Kyle was talking about earlier, is that depending on how your HMIS is set up, sometimes when you go to Client Point, you might just see the name down through the veteran status. But some people have those extra fields of date of birth and so on and so forth. So, and I'm just going to hit on this because this has been a big problem across the state. So Kyle's client that he made was Kyle Test. So I'm going to put that into the system. So I'm going to hit search. So as we see here, there's 2 Kyle Tests that come up. So we have a really great army of interns here in Columbia that have been merging clients, because we do know that some clients have, you know, 2, 3 profiles, but they've been doing a really great job of merging those together. And we're almost done for the whole entire state. So if you see those interns, give them a little pat on the back, snaps, you know, a little piece of candy, whatever you have. They just have done a great job. It is important that since we have cleaned this up, we don't want it to be like when you go home, your kid, like, clean the house and the kids have just messed up everything. You know, if you have kids, y'all know what I'm talking about. You know, we want to keep everything nice, neat, and clean, because once again, that does play into our system performance measures and to some other reports that we have to submit on a federal level. So when we're looking at these clients, so like for example, this client had, there's 2 Kyle Tests in the system. What I teach folks who are merging clients is that use the rule of 2. So here we have name, social, birthday. As long as 2 of those 3 fields match up, it's probably a 99% chance that's the same person, okay? If you see, because, you know, this will come up, it's, you know, we're not living in a unicorn and rainbow world. We know that it's going to happen, that we're going to have some client profiles that get duplicated. Everybody's been doing a really great job of submitting these client ID numbers to your system admins to let us know, hey, there are clients with duplicate profiles in the system. So in this case, let's say that that this was the same person. What I would do as a case manager is, number one, do not send the person's name. If you send a very common name, I am not going to go through 2,000 folks trying to figure out which client this is. It is very helpful that you put in the ID numbers for the client. So I would send an email to my system administrator saying, number 94 and 81 need to be merged, please. It takes us a quick second, we get them merged for you. So please, as helpers to the system, please make sure that as you're looking for those clients, as you're going back through the system, is just making sure that if you see duplicate profiles, you let us know. Okay? Now, a good rule of thumb is that I know our folks here in Columbia is that they have files for the client that if they write the HMIS number on the file sometimes to help identify very quickly for their intake person. So this might be a good rule to have if you want to follow suit. So this is our client that we're going to be, that we've entered into the program. So I'm going to click on his profile. I'm going to use the current system date, and I'm ready to check him out of the program. So I'm going to click on that second pencil, and today is the day that I'm going to check him out of the system. Okay, the first thing I want to do is I want to know the reason for leaving. So why is he leaving my program? Well, we hope and pray that it's because they completed the program, we're moving them into permanent housing. But unfortunately, that's not always the case. Maybe they were non-compliant with the program, or in just an example we had today, I let Miss Diane know that one of her clients unfortunately passed away this weekend. So unfortunately, if that was the case, Miss Diane would put death, and then we would fill in the destination. So let's just say they completed program. Okay. So you have your different options right here. Okay. Now we do know there's these options down here that exist, like data not collected, client refused, client doesn't know, no exit interview completed. Just understand when you start getting into those weeds of choices that it really starts messing up data quality, not just for your program, but for the entire continuum of care. What we suggest doing is that if you have a destination or that you have a client that you don't know where they went to, don't just give up. Y'all are outreach workers, y'all work with very difficult clients. Don't just give up. Y'all are not in the habit of giving up. What we suggest doing is, number one, look at HMIS to see if they have an entry into another program. Well, maybe they went to Myrtle Beach, and I see they had an entry for one of their emergency shelters. Well, I know where that client went to. He went to emergency shelter. Let's say there's no indicators in HMIS of where this client went to. This is where you start utilizing your case conferencing sessions. You utilize your other outreach workers and your other case managers in your continuum of care. Is that, I know that we have a really great group that meets here, and everybody seems to know a little bit about everybody. So bring those names to case conferencing and just say, hey, does anybody know where Kyle went to? Okay? And you might, they may have told an outreach worker, hey, I'm going to my aunt's house in Orlando. Okay? You just never know. So you only want to leave the choices of like client doesn't or client refused or other. You want to leave those for the after you have done the groundwork and you have done everything you can possibly do to figure out where this client is. Okay? I know that seems like a lot of work, but in the long run, it helps each continuum of care in the state to figure, know exactly where the client went first of all, but it also helps our system performance measures and how HUD is looking at us to judge us on certain things. Okay? Now, we know that we want those positive outcomes. We get that. We want to see them in housing, but once again, we know that is not a reality for 100% of our clients. Okay? We need everybody to put the correct destination in the section. Because like I said earlier, if you're putting them into permanent housing, that's great, that's wonderful, for your program, you're gonna get snaps on that one. But in the long run, the whole continuum of care could get dinged, because if they go back into a shelter program and they never went into a permanent supportive housing program, then that looks like a return to homelessness, and it kind of brings down your grade, quote unquote, for your continuum. So, we just need everybody to be very open and honest about what's going on, because this is where we need to get our data analysts to figure out, what are we seeing? Are we seeing that a bunch of people are just disappearing on us? What's going on? And this is where we can do a lot of community, analysis and figure out what's going on with these clients and how to better help them. Okay. Just be careful, like when you start getting into your rentals. I know there's a lot of choices, so just be very careful about which one you choose. And then also the ones where they're staying with friends and family. Some people say, well, what is permanent versus temporary? The way we explain it is that if they're just couch surfing at Aunt Joe's place, they're temporary tenure. But if they're actually moving their address and they have their own bed there, and that's what they're called their permanent address, that is a permanent tenure. There's a big difference between that permanent and temporary tenure section. So please make sure very carefully that you are looking over that section. All right, so we're going to say that we got them into permanent housing. Good job to the team from Waccamaw. All right, so we're going to save and continue. There it goes. Now, once you save and continue, it's going to give you one last chance to update any information that you need to in the system. I know that our workers around the state do their best they can to update the client information, but you want to get every single brownie point that you possibly can. So if you just did an update 2 weeks ago, but Kyle got another job or he got more benefits, put that into the system when you're closing them out, because you get credit for that. Okay? You want to get all the credit that you possibly can because of your hard work. Okay? Like when you're in school, you got stickers for doing really great work, and we want to give you every single sticker. I may not be able to physically give you a sticker, but we want to give you the best possible snaps, kudos that we possibly can. So please make sure that you are filling out that information, updating that information as you're exiting them. Okay? So we're going to save and exit, and you know that they are exited because you see that there is a date in the exit date column. Okay. So if you have any questions on that, you can also type it into the chat box, and we will talk about that as well. And Melissa's going to tag. I'm going to jump off, and she's going to.
I just wanted to mention, can you show them where they should be putting their move-in date?
Oh, yes. There's a section in the move-in date. It just depends on some. I'm not going to go into the assessment because it's different for every team of care. But Melissa brings up a very good point. When you're exiting that person and they are going into permanent housing, within your entry-exit, and like I said, it's different from every continuum. You need to put the housing move-in date. That is very important. We do try to get our permanent supportive housing folks to also fill it in, but 2 heads are better than 1. So if you know the housing move-in date, you put it in there just in case that next case manager forgets to put that housing move-in date within the entry-exit date. Okay? You got anything else to add about entry-exits? Nope. Okay.
So right now, there's no approved PATH data quality report, although we do run a data quality report monthly, and that needs to be at 96%. Helen does that, and you'll hear from her if you're not at 96%. So reasons that when you're looking at your clients and you're trying to figure out why some data errors are pulling at null, some of those reasons could be because the provider isn't the same as the entry-exit provider. or the time of service comes before the time you're looking at it. That's correct. And Helen's going to show us, are you going to go in and show them a data quality report that pulls the, no?
Well, we're in the training site, so. Like Melissa said about the data quality reports, usually, I mean, some system admins run them once a month, twice a month. Once again, it's up to the discretion of your continuum of care. We do have data quality kind of standards, as I say. We want every single provider to be at a 96% or higher for all your clients. So like Kyle was talking about earlier, is that when we look at data quality, your supportive services provider, yes, we want them at 96% off the bat, okay? When it comes to street outreach, the only ones we're looking at is the ones that are engaged, okay? So if we do know that street outreach section, you're still trying to develop that relationship with that client. So we do understand you may not get all of those pieces of information right off the bat. That may come as you make more contacts and you build that relationship. So you're going to have to piece that puzzle together. So just make sure that when you hear data quality, is that you're knowing for the outreach programs that those are the clients who are engaged only. Okay. All right. Oh, sorry guys. Mouse is hot mess.
Helen, I ask a question.
Sure, go
So
ahead.
when you all run your report, you run the street outreach and the supportive, and you only give us the report for the supportive that's engaged for the cleanup?
So for the data quality, for the ones that I send y'all, so we just run a regular 252 data quality report for supportive services, because those, we just run that basic report because it's going to pull in everybody. We have a specialized report that only looks at data engaged clients. So, that's where we definitely need y'all to make sure that if you're engaged with that client and you're rocking and rolling with them to get services, that you make sure that data engagement is filled out and it comes before, on, or after that entry date. Okay, so we've had some of that happen in the past with other outreach programs, is that a lot of times our folks who are entering data for HMIS, they automatically glance over and they're like, oh, it's already filled in. I don't need to worry about answering that question. No, you need to update it for what's going on with the client right now. Okay, so if they were engaged with services 3 years ago, that data engagement is not applying to the client situation right now. So if you go in and you're starting that entry, you want to go ahead and erase that date of engagement until you're ready to put in their current date of engagement. Okay? So if you need that specific report, the administrators and the data analysts can run it for you for the outreach program. Good question.
That covers my third bullet point.
Okay.
And then that's really all I have to say. If you need further training, you guys can contact us for specific training.
And I know that a question has been posed, and Austin has made a really great report for us that talks about, hey, how long has it been since I last contacted these clients? And he's made a really great report, and he can help us get that to you if need be, so that y'all can run those on a monthly or quarterly basis. So that's up to the discretion of the PATH provider itself. Okay. All right. So it's time for Mr. Austin. So we'll make him the presenter.
All right. Can everybody see my screen? Hello, can everybody see my screen just to check in? Okay.
Yeah.
Great. So I'm entering slideshow mode. I am here to talk about the PATH report. Before I do, I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Austin Barrett, data analyst up here at the Upstate Continuum of Care. So I'm the Upstate's counterpart of Melissa, and my colleague is Cecilia, the HMIS program coordinator. So where we're at is that you've done such a great job of entering in client information through those various stages of the process, referring to that diagram that Kyle discussed at the beginning of the presentation. You've documented universal data elements, program-specific data elements. You've documented the services provided, the needs recorded, and referrals that have been made. You've made sure to specify those services under the PATH funded service so that all of that's in the system and you need to now extract it into your PATH report. So you're all well aware of the requirements for PATH, having to upload quarterly reports to the PDX system, as well as making sure that your fourth quarter report translates over to your annual report. I would just like to take about 5 minutes or less to talk about how to get that report from ServicePoint into PDX so that the PATH program coordinator can, with confidence, accomplish this task 4 times a year. So within ServicePoint, I'm going to stay within the slideshow and just refer to some of these screen grabs that I've created. There is a tab on the left underneath ShelterPoint, underneath ClientPoint, any of the other types of modules that you might have access to on the left-hand side of your screen. There is a module called Reports. And when you click on that tab, you will then be taken to a screen showing you the reports that are available to you under your license. The one that's most of relevance to this discussion is the PATH 2018 report. So when you click on that report, the little kind of icon that you see on the screen, you'll then be given these reporting options where you specify the provider as well as the date range that you want to run your report on. So most all of us have I think all of us have a reporting group created for our COC's PATH programs, both street outreach and services based. And so, for example, on my screen, we see the UHC-PATH-GMH. That is our combined street outreach and services only PATH provider reporting group. So that's been selected, and then specify the reporting date range. For the PATH project or PATH program, the report year begins on 9/1. So I've specified what we could consider the second quarter report that was just submitted about a month ago of 9/1/2018 to 2/28/2019. For reference, coming up is going to be the third quarter report. That will span from 9/1/2018 to 5/31/2019. So once you have entered in the reporting group and your program date range, you simply click on Build Report. That's the next step, and you'll be shown a whole bunch of reports, results from the report. So here is an example of just a random date range. This isn't reflective of the Greenville PATH project currently. Just wanted to show what it would look like in that main validation table, showing you the answers or the data for questions 8 through 16. So this shows you information such as the number of persons contacted by PATH-funded programs, the number of new persons contacted by street outreach, number of new persons contacted by services only. It continues down. You can see it moves from contacts to persons who became enrolled in PATH, number of active enrolled PATH persons during any point in the date range, and number of active enrolled PATH clients receiving community health services through any funding source during the reporting period. So this is kind of our key summary table, showing us contacts, enrollments, number of new persons contacted, enrolled, etc. So these are going to be key data elements to make sure are translated properly over to your PDX upload. So just to show kind of what the numbers and data that's presented in the PATH report look like, we just saw the table showing 8 through 16, the summary table of persons served. There's a table for question 17, which relates to services that were provided. Question 18 refers to referrals that were provided and the number of persons who achieved that referral. Questions 19 through 27 are related to outcomes. So persons receiving income, SSI, non-cash benefits, health insurance, health and substance abuse services. And then question 28 is broken out into a variety of different types of demographic information, such as gender, age, race, ethnicity, veteran status, living situation, chronic homelessness, to give a general profile of the clients who received PATH services during the reporting period. So once you've looked through the PATH report, you can see there are some rows of data that show you where there might be data not collected, missing data, etc., client refused. That can be one way that you use the path report for data quality cleanup. You'd be able to click on those numbers that are hyperlinked to client IDs that show you which clients have those specific data issues, and work with your COC's HMIS team to address those issues so that when you're ready to upload for your quarterly or your annual report, you have no client data issues. That's always the goal. I know it takes a good amount of effort to get there, but our HMIS departments across the state are here to help you. So instead of, again, showing data from HMIS for the path specific provider, I just wanted to show you what types of questions are presented within the path report. And I'd encourage you, when you have the time, to go and run the report yourself for your COC's path funded project, get familiar with the path report itself, and then contact your HMIS team within your COC for further assistance as needed. The next step is to take that path report once you're pleased with the data quality of it and download it. So that is a radio button that is provided within ServicePoint right next to our Build Report button. You click download. That will download your path report into a CSV file. So it's going to be a zipped file with lots of different CSV files zipped into it. What you want to make sure you do is to not open that zip file. It's going to download with a long name. Make sure you know where it downloads to. But if you open it, it tends to kind of mess up the upload process into PDX. So after you've downloaded it, the Path Program Coordinator, who has access to the Path Data Exchange, will log into PDX and then select the appropriate report. So if it's a quarterly report or the fourth quarter you're trying to turn into the annual report, make sure you select the right report. And then a simple thing to do is to upload that zip file into PDX so it auto-populates your path report data for you. So you don't have to, by hand, enter in these numbers. Of course, there's a lot of room for error when we try and translate numbers by hand from our ServicePoint application into PDX. We're trying to advocate for agencies to use the upload feature. So then, once you've uploaded it, of course, you want to make sure that it uploaded properly. So review that data, address any kind of flags or errors that might pop up, and then submit the report. So I wanted to say a couple things about the flags and errors. Sometimes it's going to be identifying some real data issues, saying this can't be possible, you need to revisit this data that's been entered for a specific field. But other times it's going to just flag it and say, hey, you didn't quite meet the thresholds that have been established by GFRA. Please explain some of the reasons why this data is below that threshold. So that's where you would then kind of look at your COC's context, or your path project's context, provide that narrative to address that flag, and then save the flag so that when you do submit, reviewers will see your explanation for why one of those thresholds might not have been met. So just a last word of advice about the upload process is to work closely with your system admins to ensure the proper upload to PDX. I know one of the highlights of my job every 3 months, I work with our Path Program Coordinator. We spend some time on the first Monday of the reporting month when it's due, going through the path report, making sure that the data is entered properly, there's no issues, making sure that clients that they had been served are pulling in correctly. There's a lot of different steps that need to be completed in order to make sure a client pulls into our reports, such as contacts being included, clients having a contact during the reporting year, etc. So my advice to everyone on the webinar is to make sure you work with your system admin to make sure that your report looks as representative of the good work you've been doing as possible, so that when it's submitted, reviewers and SAMHSA will get a good glimpse of the work that is happening in your community as it relates to PATH. So one last thing I wanted to say was that there are some changes coming up to the PATH report. So in the 2019 PATH report will be released soon, and there are two main changes that were implemented as part of this new 2019 PATH report. So there has been a new question asked in that first table where we saw data elements 8 through 16 enumerated. There's going to be a 12A and a 12B. It's going to also add to this 2019 report a new question about all the contacts that were provided during the reporting year. The previous 2018 PATH report only reported on contacts provided through the date of enrollment in PATH. So it's just another glimpse of the number of contacts being provided and reported by a PATH provider. And finally, SAMHSA decided to remove questions 26 and 27. So these are just duplicated because it's already included in the PATH report above in the summary tables and the services provided tables. Essentially, this is just information that didn't need to be entered twice. So it's going to reduce duplication and the burden PATH providers have when uploading the data. So on the service point end, we did receive an update at the end of March, how the PATH report was originally to go into effect on March 31st. There's been some delays. PDX, the submission platform, is currently working to be modified so that it can accept the new PATH report with these 2 changes. And so the PATH report 2019 will not go into effect until June 1st. So obviously, June 1st is a couple months away, but be aware, if you are submitting a quarterly report before June 1st, you are to use the PATH 2018 report format to upload the PDX. So all of us will have that due, of course, because the 3rd quarter ends on 5/31/2019. So we'll need to work together with our system admins in submitting the 3rd quarter report based on which 2018 and 2019 report is being accepted by PDX for upload. So again, this is just a culmination of all the good work that you've done in the community, at your mental health centers, the good work that you've done inputting this information into HMIS. The reporting aspect should be kind of a celebration of sorts. Once you've addressed some of those final data quality issues, it's a virtual cakewalk, or it should be, uploading the PDX, working closely with your HMIS department throughout that whole process. So that's my section, and I think at this point we have some time to entertain some questions, and so I'll hand the ball back to Helen and potentially Clint to work on that.
Austin. Alrighty. Alright, so Clint, I know you were managing the chat box, and we'll go ahead and let you kind of take over.
Hey guys, this is Clint. I'm HMIS Echo. Hello, future. And we didn't have any questions in the chat box on the webinar. Do any users have any questions that we might could fill out and get answered for you? Won't everybody ask at once?
Michelle has a question over here.
I'm just going to make a clarification, or maybe it could be a question. The 96% data quality standard, is that a mock data quality standard, or is that statewide?
It's HUD and statewide. Like at one time, the state was doing 95%, but because certain reports have it where it marks the error below 95, we just upped it to 96%, just to make sure that we have less wiggle room to make errors, and that if we're catching that each month, then it just makes it easier when we do our federal reporting.
Okay, so when you say HUD, obviously HUD it's an HMIS standard. It's not just to let everyone know who is watching this or will be watching this, it's not a SAMHSA set standard or anything. That's something that HUD and HMIS, you're applying across the system. Is that right? Okay, good. Just wanted to clarify that, and also just make sure I understood that. Thanks.
No problem.
And Michelle, this is Kyle over at Echo. I did want to also just highlight the one slide that was talking about community mental health. I know that you guys, as the state PATH contact, have it as a goal that 100% of enrolled clients have a documented community mental health service in the system. I know that Caitlin wanted to make sure that we highlighted that for everybody across the state, that that is a goal for South Carolina to receive 100% of client services for clients that are enrolled as community mental health.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Kyle, for reiterating that. Appreciate it. As overall, our definition of enrollment, those of y'all, I'm sure know this, but I'll just highlight it because it just meshes with what Kyle just said, that if you are enrolled in PATH, then you should have no new case. You should have, whatever that means to your agency. Department of Mental Health, there's a whole 2 providers that we have. There's a whole process for opening a case. With nonprofits, you have your own process for opening cases. So by definition, you've been assessed certainly for eligibility of homelessness, and definitely also assessed for a diagnosed with a serious mental illness. Between those 2, there should be a service, right, in addition to contacts. And the other, so that meshes with what Kyle just said, which is good. Another issue that came up, and it's come up going through the workflows that we've gone through here this morning. But also remember, especially for you data entry folks that will be either are or will be entering in data, always remember that you always have to key in those contacts in addition to, even when you're doing service provision, you still have enrollment, you still have contacts that you're making each time as well. It's easy to forget because you're contact, and then enrollment, services, you still have to key in each of those services. Each time there's also a contact as well, especially now that we're tracking contacts even pre and post enrollment, it looks like. So that's really important.
Does anybody else have any questions for us today? All right. I guess we're going to pass it back to you, Helen. If you have any other HMIS related questions later on, you can always submit a ticket also with your coalition and ticketing system.
Thanks everybody for coming. We greatly appreciate it. I know that this is a lot, especially for our new folks. For the new folks who are attending either in person or online, you will need to get with your system administrator for your continuum of care to do a test client, to make sure you understood all the pieces and parts of what was presented in the presentation today. That was a tongue twister, but I got it out. So if, like I said, if you're new, make sure you, if you're a system admin, make sure you have your user agreement form ready to go, and then we'll get you set up at the training site to make sure you got everything that you need today. So you have anything that you want to, or Caitlin, you have anything you want to say before we close it out?
I just want to say thanks for all the presenters and those in attendance. We appreciate it. Of course, you can always get with, as Helen said, get back with your system administrator, obviously your respective one. All 4 continuums and HMIS admins for each of the 4 continuums are represented here today, which is great. Contact them if you have any questions. And this is all in addition to your overall HMIS training that people are receiving on a regular basis across the state. So thanks so much. Appreciate it. This is being recorded, so if anyone wants to watch it again or share this with other staff or new staff, please do. Thanks.
All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll talk to you next time.
Okay, thanks. Bye-bye.